How to check the voltages at the terminal block. Disconnect the dryer from the wall outlet before proceeding. Turn the dryer around and remove the terminal block cover. Place the multimeter on a chair and set it to read higher than 240 volts. You need to use a set of insulated alligator clips on your test probes so you don't have to be touching any wires or touching the dryer while you do this live test. Connect the test probes to terminals L1 and L2 on the terminal block like this. Connect the dryer to the wall outlet and make sure you don't touch the dryer at all. The reading should be about 240 volts. Disconnect the dryer from the wall outlet. Connect the test probes between terminals L1 and N. Connect the dryer again to the wall outlet and make sure you don't touch the dryer at all. The reading should be about 120 volts. Disconnect the dryer from the wall outlet again. Connect the test probes to terminals N and L2. The reading should be about 120 volts. The voltages should be as follows. From L1 to L2 should be about 240 volts. From L1 to N should be about 120 volts. And from L2 to N should be about 120 volts. If you get the right voltages at the terminal block, then the problem is in the dryer. If you don't get the right voltages at the terminal block, then the problem could be in the fuse or circuit breaker box or in the wall outlet. How to check and replace the thermal cutoff and the high limit thermostat. Disconnect your electric or gas dryer from the wall outlet before proceeding. You should already know how to dismantle the dryer up to this point. One of the parts that you check first when the dryer stops heating is the thermal cutoff. Remove one of the wires from the thermal cutoff. Set your multimeter on the lower setting to read ohms. Take a reading between the two terminals on the thermal cutoff. The reading should be 0 ohms. If the reading is infinity or OL, meaning open line, the thermal cutoff is bad and you will need to replace it. The thermal cutoff and the high limit thermostat come together as a kit, so you must replace them both. To replace the thermal cutoff, remove the wires, remove the two holding screws, remove the thermal cutoff, place the new one in place, screw in the holding screws, and connect the two wires. It doesn't matter which way they go. To check the high limit thermostat, remove one of the wires and take a reading between the two terminals on the high limit thermostat. The reading should be 0 ohms. If the reading is infinity or OL, meaning open line, the high limit thermostat is bad and you will need to replace it. If the thermal cutoff is bad, you don't even have to check the high limit thermostat. Just replace it because they come together on a kit. To replace the high limit thermostat, just remove the wires, remove the two holding screws, remove the high limit thermostat, install the new one, screw in the holding screws, and connect the two wires. Doesn't matter which way they go. Reassemble the rest of the dryer and you're done replacing the thermal cutoff and the high limit thermostat. How to check and replace the heating element. Disconnect the dryer from the wall outlet before proceeding. You should already know how to dismantle the dryer up to this point. To check the heating element, remove one of the wires from the heating element. Set your multitester on one of the lowest settings to read ohms. Take a reading between the two terminals on the heating element. The reading should be about 10.5 ohms. In an analog meter like this, it's going to almost look like 0 ohms. That should be okay. If the reading is infinity or OL, meaning open line, the heating element is bad and you will need to replace it. To replace the heating element, start by removing this heater plate. Remove the wires from the heating element. Remove this heating element holding screw. Hold the heater box bracket with your left hand, and with your right hand on a pair of pliers, grab the heater and pull it right out like this. Clean the heater box with a brush or use a vacuum cleaner. Grab the new heating element with a pair of pliers and slide it into the heater box like this until it sets in place. Screw in the heater holding screw. Install the heater plate. And connect the 2 wires to the heating element. It doesn't matter which way they go. Reassemble the rest of the dryer and you're done replacing the heating element. How to check and replace the operating thermostat. Disconnect your electric or gas dryer from the wall outlet before proceeding. You should already know how to dismantle the dryer up to this point. To check the operating thermostat, set your multimeter on the lower setting to read ohms. Remove one of the red wires from the operating thermostat. Take a reading with your ohms meter between the 2 terminals of the red wires. The reading should be 0 ohms. If the reading is infinity or OL, meaning open line, the operating thermostat is bad and you will need to replace it. Now let me show you how to check the thermostat heater. Remove one of the violet wires from the thermostat heater. Take a reading between the 2 thermostat heater terminals like this. The reading should be between 5600 and 8400 ohms. If the reading is infinity or OL, meaning open line, the operating thermostat is bad and you will need to replace it. Put the wires back. Remove the 2 thermostat holding screws. And remove the thermostat with the wire still attached to it. Grab the new thermostat and set it in place. Screw in the 2 holding screws and transfer each one of the wires one by one from the old thermostat to the new one. Reassemble the rest of the dryer and you're done checking and replacing the operating thermostat. The thermistor is an electronic sensor and is using this dryer instead of the operating thermostat. The even heat control monitors the exhaust temperature using the thermistor and cycles the heater relay on and off to maintain the desired temperature. Set your multitester to read ohms. Remove one of the wires from the thermistor. Take a reading with your ohms meter between the 2 terminals on the thermistor. With the temperature in the room at about 70 degrees, the reading should be between 9 and 11,000 ohms. If the reading is infinity, or OL meaning open line, the thermistor is bad and you will need to replace it. Disconnect the wires from the thermistor. Touch the 2 terminals on the thermistor with your multitester test probes and hold them there. Apply heat with a hair dryer and keep an eye on the meter. If the resistance decreases, that's a good indication that the thermistor is working the way it's supposed to. Turn the hair dryer off and keep an eye on the meter. If the resistance starts increasing, that's an indication that the thermistor is working the way it's supposed to. Here is the same test using a digital multitester. Apply heat with a hair dryer and keep an eye on the meter. If the resistance decreases, that's a good indication that the thermistor is working the way it's supposed to. Turn the hair dryer off and keep an eye on the meter. If the resistance starts increasing, that's an indication that the thermistor is working the way it's supposed to. The even heat electronic control assembly is what turns on or off the heater relay when the thermistor senses that the dryer needs more or less heat. Therefore, if all the parts that we checked before, including the heater relay, work properly, you have to assume that the problem is on the even heat electronic control assembly. This is an electronic part, and like most electronic parts, it could burn very easily. Check for burnt parts on the even heat electronic control assembly. Now this control, you have to replace it, you cannot repair it. Read the instructions that comes with the even heat electronic control assembly before trying to replace it. Disconnect the dryer from the wall outlet again. Open the controls panel. Disconnect one of the red wires with a white stripe from the heater relay. Take a reading with your ohms meter between these two terminals on the heater relay. The reading should be between 2 and 3000 ohms. If the reading is infinity or OL, meaning open line, the relay is bad and you will need to replace it. How to check and replace the temperature switch. Disconnect your electric or gas dryer from the wall outlet before proceeding. To check the temperature switch, you will need to open the controls panel. Set your multimeter to read ohms. Disconnect the violet wire from the timer. Disconnect the red, black, and blue wire harness from the timer. Connect your multimeter test probes between the blue wire and the violet wire. Like this. Set the switch on high heat. The reading should be between 5 and 7000 ohms. Set the switch on medium high heat. The reading should be between 3 and 4000 ohms. Set the switch on medium heat. The reading should be between 800 and 1000 ohms. Set the switch on low heat. The reading should be between 1 and 10 ohms. This is how the temperature switch works. Depending on the setting, the temperature switch will allow electricity to flow to the operating thermostat heater. The heater is located inside of the thermostat. When you set the temperature switch on low heat, electricity flows to the operating thermostat heater. The heater gets hot, and the operating thermostat will cycle at a lower temperature. When you set the temperature switch on high heat, no electricity flows to the operating thermostat heater, and the operating thermostat cycles at the rated temperature of about 155 degrees. That is the way that the temperature switch works. According to your selections, allows electricity to flow to the operating thermostat heater or not. How to replace the temperature switch. Remove the temperature switch knob. Disconnect the wire harness from the switch. Use a screwdriver to lift this tab, then turn the switch clockwise until it comes out. Set the switch in place with the tab pointing to about 11 o'clock. Push on the switch a little bit and turn counterclockwise until the switch snaps in place. Plug in the wire harness and install the knob. How to replace the temperature switch 2. Remove the knob. Disconnect the two wires from the temperature switch. Lift the tap using a screwdriver and turn the switch clockwise until you can get it out. Set the switch in place with the tap pointing about 11 o'clock. Push on the switch and turn it counterclockwise until it snaps in place. Connect the two wires to the switch, doesn't matter which wire goes where, and install the knob. Close the controls panel and you're done checking and replacing the temperature switch. What to check in the timer when the dryer won't heat? Disconnect your electric or gas dryer from the wall outlet before proceeding. Set the timer dial on the cycle that you use the most. You should already know how to open the controls panel. Go ahead and open it. Set your multimeter on the lower setting to read ohms. Disconnect the wire harness with the blue, black, and red wires from the timer. Take a reading between the terminals marked BK and R on the timer. The reading should be 0 ohms. If the reading is infinity or OL, meaning open line, the timer is bad and you will need to replace it. This is the way to replace a bad timer. Remove the timer knob by pulling it straight out. Remove the two timer holding screws and pull the timer out with the wire still attached to it. Put the new timer in place and screw in the two holding screws. Transfer the wires from the bad timer to the new timer. Install the timer knob and reassemble the controls panel, and you're done replacing a bad timer. How to check the motor centrifugal switch contacts 1 and 2. Disconnect your electric or gas dryer from the wall outlet before proceeding. You should already know how to take the dryer apart up to this point. Disconnect the wire harness from the motor. Disconnect the blue wire from the motor overload protector switch. Disconnect the yellow wire from the belt switch and connect it to the terminal on the motor overload protector switch like this. This way we are bypassing the belt switch so we don't have to use it to run the motor. Sharpen the tip of a piece of coat hanger wire like this. Drill 2 holes on the plastic above each one of the red wires on the motor wire harness like this. This way you can stick your multitester test probes to check terminals 1M and 2M. Connect your alligator clip from your test cord to terminal 4M, which is blue, and 5M, which is white, like this. Connect the wire harness to the motor. Connect your multimeter test probes through the 2 holes on the wire harness to check the 2 red wires like this. Set your multimeter on the lower setting to read ohms. Without touching any part of the dryer, plug in the test cord. With the motor running, the reading should be 0 ohms. If the reading is infinity or OL, meaning open line, the motor switch is bad and you will need to replace the motor. That was the way to check the motor switch contacts 1M and 2M.